Welcome to our examination guidance for Year 9 exams. Our aim at Deer Park is to ensure that the exams process is as smooth as possible for all students in what can sometimes feel like a pressured time to families. The reason that we're doing this in Year 9 is we are very aware of the fact that this year's cohort in Year 9 haven't sat their SATs officially due to COVID. So we're starting this process earlier than we might do to ensure that all students are prepared for their GCSEs by the time they get to Year 11. Now, today's session is just about looking through all of the routines and the procedures that we will need to follow and the students will need to follow in order to have a successful exam series. So I thought it'd be useful to show you the iceberg illusion. Now, obviously, we want all students to be successful at the end, and that is, as I say, just the tip of the iceberg. What people see is this set of GCSE results that most people see are really important at the end. And obviously that will look completely different to all students. But underneath that, there are lots of other things that need to go on. And we're really aware that actually exams, some students don't mind them, some students really struggle with them. And it's a separate journey and an individual journey for all students. And there's lots and lots of things that students will need to go to in order to get that success at the end. So we're not saying that this process is going to be easy, but what we are trying to do is we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the students, obviously with your support, and making them good at all of those things like becoming persistent. You know, we will always fail. So if they don't do so well in these exams, then they've got Year 10, they've got Year 11, they've got a long time to go. And also start to get in those routines and that dedication to hard work for them. As well, I always talk about disappointment. You know, this is a time where students are learning and this will be their first kind of exposure to these things. So if they are disappointed afterwards, again, it's not something they have failed at. It's just something for them to take on board and move forward for next time. And how can you make it better moving forward into Year 10 when we have their full set of practice exams? So why do we need these rules? Now, the examining bodies and also the JCQ that's in charge of all exams are really, really clear on their guidance in terms of their procedures. So how we have to do certain things. So all of the things that you'll get in the leaflet later on that will tell you exactly what we need to do, that isn't prescribed by us. That is guidance given to all schools and we have to follow it. And the reason we have to follow those procedures is because things such as malpractice, and if that happens, what could happen? Now, the worst case scenario, which is never going to happen, is that if we don't follow these rules and procedures and we break these rules, that, you know, students may not be awarded all of the GCSEs that they deserve. So we need to be really, really clear on that. And also the reason that malpractice can also be considered as us in the centre is also unauthorised items. So we have to be really, really careful about what students can and can't do. And obviously your support in that will be fundamental in making sure that the students come to us with all of the right equipment and obviously all of those unauthorised items that they're not allowed in exams are not present. So in case you haven't met Mrs. Clark, she's got a number of different roles within the school, but Mrs. Clark is actually going to be should I say, our exams officer for Deer Park. So if you do have any questions or queries in terms of logistics, then Mrs. Clark is the person to speak to. Obviously, anything subject specific should go to subject specific teachers, and that should be directed towards them. But anything in terms of the logistics for exams, Mrs. Clark is the person who will be able to answer all of your questions. So, exam prep. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at what kind of this thing the students can prepare with, and also what they would do prior to the exams, during the exams, and after the exams. And we're not expecting every single person to remember every single thing, which is why we do this, because it's all about learning. So the first thing that will happen in terms of preparation is that after Easter, I will sit with all of the Year 9s in an exam assembly and run through a very similar presentation to what you are listening to or watching right now. We will also have tutor sessions. So in tutor time, the students will learn about their exams, how they will do that, the logistics of it, the routines of it. We would obviously recommend all students put themselves together for a revision timetable. And we're not saying that they need to do hours and hours of revision, but it's just that first taste of revision timetable, and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So things like focusing on themselves, don't pay attention to what other person's revision timetable looks like, choosing the right time of day. So if they are going to do some revision, doing it, say, before bed might not be the best option, or doing it at 5 o'clock in the morning. What revision methods work for them? So lots of teachers will be looking at revision methods over the next few weeks, and it will just be an opportunity for the students to start to look at what kind of techniques might work for them. They might try some, it might be a complete disaster. They might try some and it might be great for them and it really, really work. Mrs. Clark's going to provide all students with an exams timetable. So if you could just make sure that you have seen that exams timetable, and you can remind the students of when they might have their exams so they're fully prepared for their routine. They will also have seat numbers. They'll be allocated a specific seat for the exams, and they will be required to sit in that seat every single time. So they will all be numbered in the sports hall. All of our exams will be taken in the sports hall, and also in terms of absence. So if a student is absent, there is no need to panic. What we will do is we will do a catch-up session for the students to be able to complete that exam. Now, please remember, at this moment in Year 9, we are only doing core exams and their humanities in the sports hall. So although they will have assessments in all of their subjects at some point or another, during this week, it will only be maths, English, science, geography or history. So the equipment required. Now, this is really important to get into really good habits for this, because these will be the mandatory equipment requirements for all GCSEs. So the most important thing is to have black pens. The reason for this is in real exams, they will scan in the exam paper, and then examiners will mark them electronically. So if they don't use black ink, their writing may not be able to be seen. A transparent pencil case or clear plastic bag. So we cannot have any normal pencil cases, unfortunately. What we do find is as students move towards Year 11, they tend to just bring their equipment, and that can be in a clear plastic case. If they don't have a plastic bag, that's not a problem. They could just hold all of their things. They will also need a calculator for many of their exams, not all of them. And we will specify that in the leaflet of exactly what subjects will need what things. But when they do need a calculator, we must stress that they must not have the case and the equation sheet that comes inside that case. It's just the calculator completely by itself. So before the exams, so there's a few things that would be really great if you could go through your students with. So going to the toilet before the exam. We will allow students to go to the toilet. We obviously don't recommend it. There are certain rules when it comes to the real exams about how long, but they will be accompanied. And if they, even when they're accompanied, they will not get any extra time if they've been to the toilet. So it's really important that they go to the toilet before the exam, and don't, unless there's an emergency, go to the toilet during the exam. They'll be asked to arrive 10 minutes before the start of the exam, and they must have all their belongings put away before they enter the exam hall. So for instance, everything needs to go in their bag, their coat needs to come off before they enter the sports hall. Now, it's really, really important when they are lining up that they are then in silence and in silence when they're entering the exam hall. Now, that's really, really important. So in the real exams, there can't be any malpractice, but also they can hear any information that is being given to them and they don't miss anything. So they can take a drink of water into the exams if they would like to, but the tables aren't huge, so they may not want to do that. It's quite short exams for these ones. The next thing that we must have, and again, this comes from the JCQ, we must not have any mobile phones, any earphones, any watches of any sort on that person in the exams. They must all be switched off and in bags or in lockers. It's really, really important that all students are on time for their exams. Obviously, if they are late, we will allow them to come into the exam if it's within enough time, but they won't get any extra time at the end of that exam. So I thought it might be just worth showing you how the students will enter. So they will line up for the exam entry towards the right side of the sports hall, alongside by the court, so you can see the silent zone. And again, you know, we don't want to scare the students, but disturbing an exam in any way could also result in a disqualification from all your exams. So we just don't want to be in that situation. So during the exam, so when the students sit down for their exam, they are asked to check their exam paper, to check that it's the right one. Obviously it should be. It will be invigilators that will be running the exams themselves, so they may not recognise those people. They'll be new, but they will all be more than enough in terms of their experience, so they'll know what they're doing. Either an invigilator or a member of SLT will read the instructions of the exam and will also announce when students can start. So it's really important that they don't write anything on their paper until they are instructed to do so. Already mentioned about toilet breaks, and they're not permitted unless it's an emergency. If you do have a toilet pass, however, you will be permitted to go to the toilet during the exam, but as I said previously, you will be supervised by a member of the exam staff going to and from the toilet. If any of the equipment breaks, please ask your students to pop their hand up. There's nothing worse than if something breaks during the actual process of the exams. They don't say anything, therefore they don't do as well. So they just need to raise their hand and someone will come over and swap their equipment for you. The same as if it is a calculator as well. We will sort that one out. The massive thing that's really, really important here is the communication with other students. So once they enter the exam room, they must stay silent. They are not to communicate with any other students in any way. And if another student is trying to communicate with them, we would like them to be able to raise their hand and notify an invigilator so that can be dealt with. Unfortunately, communication with other students, any form, not just talking, is classed as malpractice, and in the exams, we would have to notify the exam board. So when the exams are finished, students will be asked to stop writing, they'll be asked to put their pens down, they'll be asked to close their answer booklet, check all information on the front is completed, and the most important thing is to stay in silence until the end of the exam time, and they have been dismissed and they are out of the exam hall. They will be asked to hand their paper and inserts to the invigilators, leave any borrowed equipment on the desk, and then they'll be dismissed in turn by the invigilators, and they must stay in silence until they are outside of the exam hall. At that point, once they've collected their belongings, they will then return to their lesson to be registered. So what can you do at home to help support your child? So the most important thing really is to reassure them. All they can do is try their best. Practice makes perfect. So this is the first run at this. They may get things wrong. And if they do, we'll look at that. We'll feed back to them. We'll have those conversations to make sure that we can improve that next time. Help them plan their time and stay calm. This is their first time. So we're not expecting anything more than them just giving everything a go. Sleeping, obviously it's really important to get those 7 to 8 hours sleep a night. Eating, can't recommend a nice healthy balanced diet in order to give them that energy for their exams, and also exercise. So if they are getting a little bit worried, get them out, get them going for a walk. Obviously they'll still have their core PE lessons, and if you are worried or concerned about anything, then please do not hesitate to contact either myself, Mrs. Clark, or Mr. Smith, the head of year, or any of your students' tutors. Thank you very much for your time if you've got this far, and again, please do ask for help if you have any other questions.